Last time we met, we looked at the practice test on justice and the law, and you had a worksheet or a Word document, and you had to work through the Word document with the information given. So to start off with, you were given words in a block, and you had to fill in the 10 missing words. Today, we're going to focus on marking your actual work. So you're going to have to use the model answer at the end of this document and go back and correct all of your work. For example, number 1, if a person accused of a crime or the defendant cannot afford a lawyer, one is provided to them through, and I've put the answer, civil law. You have to go to the end of the document on the last page to see the correct answer. So if I go to the very last page, it says number 1, if a person accused of a crime, the defendant, cannot afford a lawyer, one is provided to them through legal aid. Legal aid is the correct answer. So I need to go back and correct this. And I can type legal aid next to it. You can also change the color if you want to make that red. You can change the correct answer to red. And then you're going to mark the rest of the answers for 1 to 10. So let's have a look. Number 2, in criminal law, it is up to the prosecutor. The prosecutor is trying to prove that the defendant is guilty. The defendant is the person that is accused or charged with a crime, and that is known as the burden of proof. One of the oldest known group of laws originating in Babylon from 1792 BCE to 1754 BCE is known as the Code of Hammurabi. And there we looked at the harsh king of Hammurabi, and he instilled these laws. For instance, if somebody kidnapped a son, they'd be put to death. If you accuse somebody of a crime, such as murder, but you could not prove it, you yourself would be killed. An example of a law that is passed by state parliament is the legal driving age in that state. That is correct because if you look in Victoria, to get your P plates, you have to be 18, but in New South Wales, you can get your P plates when you're 17. Number 5, a jury or a jury member is one of 12 people in a criminal trial. The jury will sit there, there's 12 of them, and they sit next to the judge and they listen to the whole case. And at the end of the court case, the jury will decide if the person is guilty or innocent. At the end of the court case, the judge will say to the jury, how do members of the jury find the defendant? And the jury needs to say guilty or not guilty. Civil law deals with disputes between two people. And another word for dispute is a disagreement between two people. They could be disagreeing over something like an accident or property damage. So if somebody drove into my fence and they didn't want to pay to repair the fence, I could actually take them to a civil court to ask for the damages to my fence to be paid back. Question 7. Murder, robbery, and drug offences would all be defined as crimes under criminal law. Those are crimes. Number 8, the family court deals with cases that involve divorce and custody of children. An example of an outcome, and an outcome is what actually happens at the end of a civil case, would be that the person found guilty of damaging property needs to actually reimburse. And if you reimburse somebody, you pay back the value of the damage that you have caused. So if my fence cost $3,000 to fix, I would need to be reimbursed $3,000 to get that fixed. If somebody bashes into the back of my vehicle, they don't stop in time, and it causes $800 worth of damage to my bumper, I would need to be reimbursed or paid back the $800 to actually fix it. A basic distinction, another word for distinction is difference. between criminal and civil law is that criminal acts injure individuals and society as a whole. An act is something that you do. So anytime somebody commits a crime, they're committing a crime against us or against society. This court hierarchy you do need to know. It is going to be in your test, so you do need to know how to label it. Starting at the bottom, we have the Magistrates Court, then the Children's Court, then the County Court, Supreme Court of Victoria, your Court of Appeal, and the High Court of Australia. The last one that you had to do was the definitions. And with the definitions, I did say you could simply copy and paste the correct answer. And these definitions in one form or another will actually be in your test, and you need to know what they mean. So for the first one, a formal document prepared as a draft proposed by a member of parliament is known as a bill. And you all wrote a letter for a bill for a law that you would like to see changed or introduced. The person in a criminal case who is accused of the crime is known as the defendant. The defendant will need to argue or provide a case that they are actually not guilty of the crime because they might have an alibi. They might say, well, I didn't break into that person's house to steal the television. I was actually at my grandmother's house at the time that the crime was committed. A decision in which future similar cases will be referred to is known as a precedent. And with that one, I gave you the example of what's known as the Pusey case, where the driver of a Porsche was pulled over for erratic driving on the freeway, and the police vehicle with 5 policemen and women were behind it, and a truck came into the emergency lane, slammed into the back of the police vehicle, and while the police people were dying, a guy by the name of Pusey, Richard Pusey, was filming it and broadcasting it live on Facebook. If anything similar happens in the future, the judge will have a look back at the Pusey case and see how he was actually punished, and they could pass down a similar sentence. A law that is made and passed by Parliament, so it's approved by Parliament, is known as statutory law. And an example of statutory law, it could be something like age discrimination. So you can't treat people differently based on age. It could also be something like the Anti-Terrorism Act. Remember, another word for law is an act. In a criminal case, this is the responsibility of the prosecutor, and it's called burden of proof. The prosecutor, the lawyer arguing for the state, trying to say that somebody is guilty, needs to prove that that person has actually committed the crime. The first house or place a bill will go through is known as the House of Representatives. Crimes committed that are against the law fall under criminal law. Murder, theft, armed robbery, those are all examples of criminal law. A law created when a judge makes a ruling about a case not covered by statutory law is known as common law. The person who will present evidence against the defendant to prove their guilt, they are known as the prosecutor. The second house or second place a bill will go through is known as the Senate. Once you are finished correcting all of your work, save it and put it under the learning task on Compass under economics called practice test. Thanks for watching, guys.